You think healing means becoming softer, kinder, more patient with everyone around you. But the last stage of healing does something very different. It makes you stop sacrificing yourself for people who never valued the sacrifice. For most of your life, your empathy felt like both a gift and a curse. You walked into a room and instantly felt the tension. You sensed sadness in someone's silence. You noticed emotional shifts that others completely ignored. Your mind was always scanning, always absorbing. And you told yourself this was your purpose, to understand people, to support them, to carry emotional weight that others couldn't handle. But here's the brutal realization that eventually hits every empathetic. Just because you can carry someone's pain doesn't mean you're supposed to. For years, you stepped into roles nobody assigned to you: therapist, problem solver, emotional protector. You stayed longer in conversations that drained you. You tolerated behavior that slowly chipped away at your peace. You told yourself you were just being compassionate. But compassion without limits becomes self-destruction. That's the part most empaths struggle to accept. You didn't just encounter toxic dynamics, you remained inside them. Not because you were weak, because you believed understanding someone meant enduring them. You gave people endless chances. You listened to the same excuses. You carried emotional burdens that weren't yours to carry. And slowly, quietly, it exhausted you. This is the moment the last stage of healing begins, when you stop romanticizing your suffering. Because another uncomfortable truth starts to surface. Your empathy didn't trap you. Your fear of disappointing people did. You didn't want to seem cold. You didn't want to hurt anyone's feelings. You didn't want to be the person who walked away. So you stayed, even when your intuition whispered that something was wrong. But the final stage of healing forces a shift inside your mind. You stop asking yourself how much more patience you can give. Instead, a sharper question appears. Why have you been giving pieces of your peace to people who never protected it? That question changes everything, because once you see the pattern clearly, you can't unsee it. And from that moment forward, healing stops being about fixing others. It becomes about finally protecting yourself. For a long time, you believed your role in life was to help people, to understand them when no one else did, to stay patient when others walked away, to keep giving even when your energy was running on empty. You convinced yourself that this was strength, but the last stage of healing forces you to confront something most empaths spend years avoiding. You were trying to save people who were never trying to save themselves. You listened to their problems again and again and again. The same complaints, the same chaos, the same patterns. Nothing changed, but you stayed. You told yourself they just needed more time, more support, more understanding. That belief feels noble. But here's the brutal truth most empaths eventually learn. Some people don't want solutions. They want an audience. They want someone to absorb their frustration so they don't have to face their own responsibility. And you became that person. You carried emotional weight that wasn't yours. You gave advice that was ignored. You invested energy into people who were completely comfortable staying exactly the same, because deep down, part of you believed something dangerous. You believed if you loved people enough, they would finally change. But healing reaches its next stage when reality breaks that illusion. Love does not transform people who are committed to their dysfunction. That realization can feel harsh, even painful, because it forces you to admit something uncomfortable. Your empathy was being used, not always intentionally, not always maliciously, but used nonetheless. You became the emotional safety net for people who refused to grow. And the moment you see that clearly, something shifts inside you. You stop trying to rescue everyone. You stop jumping into every emotional crisis around you. You stop believing that someone else's healing is your responsibility. Instead, you start asking a different question. Not how can I fix this person, but why am I investing my energy where there is no accountability? That shift is powerful, because empathy without boundaries turns you into a permanent caretaker of other people's problems. But empathy with awareness, that turns you into someone who chooses carefully where their energy goes. And that choice marks the moment when an empath stops being everyone's emotional lifeline and finally starts protecting their own life. Something unexpected happens when you reach the deeper stages of healing. You become quieter, not because you have nothing to say, not because you're afraid, but because you finally understand something that once controlled your entire life. Not every emotion deserves your response. Before healing, your mind reacted to everything. Every tone change, every negative mood, every tension in a room felt like a signal you had to respond to. You tried to smooth it out, fix it, understand it. You believed ignoring emotional chaos made you a bad person. But healing rewires that belief. You begin to notice how much energy you waste, trying to manage emotions that were never yours to manage in the first place. And slowly, something powerful begins to grow inside you, restraint. You stop explaining yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. You stop defending boundaries that should have been respected the first time. You stop chasing approval from people who only valued you when you were easy to use, because you finally see the pattern clearly. The more access people had to your emotional energy, the less they respected it. That's the third harsh truth most empaths must confront. Unlimited access to your empathy teaches people to take it for granted. And once you understand that, everything about your behavior changes. You become selective. You listen more carefully to your intuition. You notice manipulation faster. You sense when someone is looking for support and when someone is simply looking for control. Before healing, you responded to everything. Now, you choose, and that choice creates a kind of quiet power most people can't explain. You're still compassionate, but your empathy is no longer automatic. It's intentional. You no longer pour your energy into every emotional storm around you. You watch, you observe, you decide whether someone is actually seeking growth or simply seeking another person to absorb their chaos. And when someone expects the old version of you, the endlessly patient caretaker, they are often surprised, because that version of you doesn't exist anymore, not because you became cold, but because you finally understood something that protects your peace. Your empathy is valuable, and valuable things are never given to everyone. The final stretch of healing forces you to confront a reality that many empaths spend years avoiding. You are not just healing your wounds, you are losing an identity. For a long time, being the understanding one became part of who you were. The listener, the peacemaker, the one people came to when their world was falling apart. You became known as the person who could handle anything emotionally. And at first, that identity felt meaningful. It made you feel needed, important, valuable. But healing begins to expose something uncomfortable beneath that identity. A lot of people didn't value you. They valued your availability. They valued your patience, your silence, your willingness to tolerate things that most people would walk away from. And when healing starts, that dynamic begins to collapse. You stop answering every call for emotional rescue. You stop saying yes when your mind is screaming no. You stop explaining your boundaries to people who keep crossing them. And suddenly, people notice. Some become confused, some become distant, some become angry. Why? Because the version of you they relied on is disappearing. This is where many empaths panic. They feel guilt. They feel selfish. They feel like they are becoming someone cold or unrecognizable. But the truth is far simpler and far more uncomfortable. The people who benefited from your lack of boundaries will always resist your growth, not because they hate you, because your boundaries remove their comfort. And here comes the harsh realization that marks the final stage of healing. When you stop overgiving, relationships will disappear, not slowly, quickly, because those connections were built on your endless tolerance, not mutual respect. And while that loss can feel painful at first, it also reveals something incredibly powerful. The people who truly value you will adjust. They will respect your boundaries. They will support your growth instead of resisting it. Everyone else, they were never connected to you. They were connected to what you gave them. And once you understand that difference, something shifts deep inside you. You stop fearing the loss of people who only loved the version of you that abandoned yourself, because that version of you is gone. The last stage of healing isn't dramatic. There's no announcement, no moment where the world suddenly recognizes your transformation. It's quieter than that, but far more powerful. Because one day, you wake up and realize something has changed inside your mind. You're no longer carrying everyone else's emotional weight. You're no longer losing sleep over people who never lost sleep over you. You're no longer trying to prove your kindness by tolerating things that destroy your peace. Instead, you move differently. You listen to your intuition instead of ignoring it. You step back when something feels wrong, instead of forcing yourself to stay. You protect your energy the same way you would protect your time or your money. And that's when emotional freedom begins. Not when the world changes, but when you stop participating in the patterns that once drained you. Here's the truth. Most people never accept. You cannot build a peaceful life while constantly making room for chaotic people. You cannot heal while staying attached to the same dynamics that wounded you. And you cannot grow if your empathy is still being used as a doorway for manipulation. That's why the final stage of healing demands something uncomfortable: responsibility. Not for everyone else's emotions, for your boundaries, for your time, for your peace, for the people you allow close to your life. Because from this point forward, every relationship becomes a choice. Every conversation becomes a choice. Every place you invest your emotional energy becomes a choice. So here's the challenge. Look honestly at your life right now. Who drains you every time they appear? Who only shows up when they need something? Who keeps repeating the same destructive patterns while expecting you to stay understanding forever? And now ask yourself the question that most empaths avoid. Why are you still allowing it? Healing has already shown you the truth. You're not weak, you're not broken, and you're not responsible for saving everyone. But your peace, that's your responsibility. So decide, will you keep sacrifice in your energy for people who never valued it? Or will you finally become the version of yourself who understands that empathy is powerful, but only when you decide where it belongs?